I knew something was off the moment my son leaned in and whispered, "Don't tell the neighbors or my mother." He said it so quietly, barely moving his lips, like he feared someone might overhear, as if I were some hidden shame, an inconvenient truth that didn't fit the image he'd so carefully curated. I didn't ask him why. I didn't ask anything at all. I just smiled politely at the man in pastel golf shorts watering his immaculate lawn and gave a small wave, the way a guest might. Like a stranger. It had been a long journey from Sage Bend, Oregon to Eldon's Hill, New York. 2 flights, a layover, and a rough cab ride through unfamiliar streets. I'd packed light, just a small suitcase and a tin of my raspberry scones, the kind Evan used to devour when he was a child. My knees ached with every step, stiff from the hours of travel, but I didn't complain. I never have. Not during the years of double shifts at the clinic. Not when I quietly shouldered the cost of his tuition. Not even when I co-signed the papers for the house he now ushered me into like I was some mild acquaintance. "Take your shoes off here," he said. Mira had just had the floors polished. I bent slowly, unzipping my walking shoes. The entryway gleamed, expensive tile, an abstract painting I didn't recognize, and nowhere to hang a coat. So I held it in my arms. Mira appeared from the kitchen, balancing a wine glass in one hand and her phone in the other. "Alma, welcome," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We weren't sure which flight you were on." "I texted yesterday," I said. "Right," she nodded, already half turned back to the kitchen. "We've got a full house this weekend. Neighborhood social tonight. Hope that's okay." Evan took my coat without a word and slipped it into a narrow closet by the door. Not the main hall closet, that one was packed with high-end jackets and polished shoes, the kind you buy to match the life you want people to believe you have. The living room was pristine. I'll give them that. Cool tones, sleek edges, every detail curated like a catalog spread. But there wasn't a single photo of Evan as a boy. Not one picture of me. On the mantel stood 4 frames, Myra's parents in Venice, Myra's sister in a Manhattan high-rise, her children from her previous marriage. Even the new baby had no photo with Evan, just posed portraits, all calculated and cold. "Where should I put this?" I asked, holding up the tin of scones. "Oh, just leave it on the counter," Mira said distractedly. "We're gluten-free now, but the kids might want some." The kids ages 11 and 7 peeked in, offered shy hellos, then vanished upstairs. They didn't know me. We'd never spoken. And my granddaughter, the baby, was sleeping in a high-tech white bassinet that looked more like a designer gadget than a crib. "We'll show you to the guest room," Evan said. "Not your room. Not home. Just a place to sleep." He led me down a hallway, past a door marked Private Office in discreet silver lettering, as though I'd stepped into some sterile co-working space. The guest room was tidy, stark, and cold. No books, no chair. Just a bed, a small suitcase stand, and a nightstand with a single card that read, "Welcome guests. Wi-Fi password, Thornhouse 1 Thornhouse." It was absurd. My last name was Devil. "I'll unpack later," I said, easing down onto the bed. My legs needed a break. Evan hovered for a moment, then said, "Just try to relax tonight. It's mostly Myra's circle, you know, doctors, architects, that crowd." "Of course," I said. What I meant was, I understand. I'm not supposed to talk too much. Not supposed to say who I am. Just window dressing. He left, closing the door softly behind him. I stayed seated, staring at the blank white walls. Then I reached into my purse to check for the envelope. Still there, the original deed. Because Evan couldn't qualify for a mortgage alone. He needed me. My name was still on the ownership. Legally, the house was as much mine as his. In fact, more so. I'd paid the full down payment, $286,000, from my own hard-earned savings. Money I'd set aside over 30 years. He'd said it was just a formality. "Just help me get started, Mom. It's our future." I believed him. I always did. I laid the envelope flat across my lap, smoothed a hand over it, then slowly pulled out the document like it might burn me. I took a photo. Then I slid it back inside and zipped the purse shut. Tomorrow, I'd go for a walk. I'd take my time, and I'd find someone who could help me remember how ownership actually works. By the time I got to the kitchen the next morning, the house was already buzzing. Mira was blending something tall and colorful fruit and yogurt by the look of it, while Evan scrolled through his phone near the fridge. Neither looked up when I entered. Morning, I said, not too loud, not too soft. Morning, Evan replied automatically, eyes fixed on the screen. I moved to the counter and poured myself a cup of coffee from the sleek machine that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. The coffee was thin and bitter. But I didn't complain. I sat quietly at the breakfast bar, sipping my coffee and watching. We're heading out soon, Mira said without turning. Farmer's market, then the park with the kids. That sounds nice, I replied. Maybe I'll take a walk around the neighborhood, stretch my legs. Evan finally looked up from his phone. You're sure you're okay with that? It's a pretty upscale area. Just don't talk to anyone too long, okay? I tilted my head slightly. Why would I? No reason, he said too quickly. Just, people here can be particular. I nodded, pretending not to notice the sharp glance Mira shot him, like he'd let something slip. After they left, I stood alone in the hushed kitchen. The countertops gleamed. The fridge gave off a low hum. On the table, the baby monitor blinked softly, a silent sentinel. I picked up my coffee and wandered through the rooms. I'd never been here before, never once invited. When Evan purchased the house a year ago, I was recovering from a fractured hip and couldn't travel. After that, there were always reasons. Too much going on, Mira wasn't feeling well, the house wasn't quite ready. Now that I was finally here, I understood what ready meant. It meant flawless. It meant curated to perfection. It meant controlled. It meant there was no space for me. In the hallway, I paused in front of a series of black and white photos, architectural shots, bridges at sharp angles, city skylines at dusk. But no family photos. Not even one of the baby. I opened the door to the laundry room. Inside, stacked appliances buzzed quietly. Next to them stood a tall storage cabinet. I tried the handle. It wasn't locked. Inside were files and envelopes, household paperwork, neatly labeled. One beige folder caught my eye. I recognized it instantly. The same one Evan had shown me the day he begged me to co-sign. I pulled it out. Right on top, the closing summary. Mortgage documents. Legal ownership statement. My name printed in full, Alma Devil. Below that, his name. Smaller font. Second party. I slid the folder back into place. I hadn't been looking for proof. I already knew the truth. But some part of me needed to see it again. To reassure myself I wasn't exaggerating. That I wasn't being petty. That I had every right to stand in this house. More than Mira. More than anyone. Later that afternoon, Mira came home with a canvas bag full of heirloom tomatoes and artisan bread. We're having bruschetta for dinner, she announced, like she was unveiling an exclusive event. Hope you don't mind. Sounds lovely, I said. Do you need help? She paused, caught off guard. Oh, no, it's all under control. I watched her slice tomatoes with mechanical precision, every motion careful, almost rehearsed. Everything in this house had an invisible label, approved, refined, filtered. After dinner, they invited a couple from across the street, James and Lydia Duval. He worked in investments. She sat on some neighborhood planning board. They brought a bottle of chilled wine and complimented the marble countertops and sleek fireplace. And this is Alma, Mira said with a breezy smile. Evan's family friend. Family friend. It struck like a shard of glass beneath the skin, sharp, immediate, casual. But I didn't flinch. I smiled and offered Lydia a glass of wine, letting the phrase hang between us like wallpaper paste. So nice to meet you, Lydia said, her tone pleasantly blank. Are you staying long? Just a few days, I replied. It's always nice to visit places you've invested in. Her brows lifted slightly. Oh? Are you in real estate? You could say that, I said. I helped acquire this property. Evan coughed. Myra's hand froze on the tomato bowl. Lydia laughed politely, clearly unsure whether I was joking. That night, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, the deed photo open on my phone. I stared at my name, not because I'd forgotten it, but because I needed to feel it. Like armor. I remembered when Evan called, desperate and hopeful. This is the one, Mom. The house. It's perfect. We just need a little help with the down payment. The bank wants someone with better equity. It's just on paper. Just until I refinance. I hadn't hesitated. I never did. I sold bonds I'd been holding since my husband passed away. Took a financial hit. Paid the price. But I told myself it was worth it. I told myself I was helping build something lasting for the next generation. Now, sitting in this pristine guest room, listening to my son laugh downstairs with people who thought I was just a passing acquaintance, I understood. I hadn't built anything. I just rented love on the shortest lease imaginable. The next morning, Mira greeted me with a laminated list. We'll be out most of the day. Soccer for Nolan, then a baby sensory class, she said, placing the schedule on the kitchen table like she was managing a guest at a wellness retreat. You're welcome to stay and relax. Relax, that meant stay invisible. Don't interfere. Don't speak too loudly. Evan added, there's food in the fridge if you're hungry. Just help yourself. As if I hadn't made every meal of his childhood from scratch. As if I needed instructions on how to feed myself. I nodded. Of course. You two enjoy your day. They left in a whirlwind of diaper bags, strollers, and well-rehearsed chaos. The door clicked shut behind them, and silence swept over the house like a thick, weighted curtain. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, holding my coffee. Then I opened the refrigerator. It was packed with green juices, plastic containers marked with calorie counts, pre-cut vegetables, and protein bars, nothing that resembled food to me. Nothing warm. Nothing familiar. I shut the fridge and wandered back into the living room. I tried, briefly, to feel like I belonged. I sat on the edge of the pristine sofa, picked up a glossy interior design magazine, flipped through 3 pages, and set it down again. That's when I noticed it. A small gallery wall by the staircase, 6 framed photos arranged in a perfect grid. Myra's family, of course. Her parents on a sailboat. Her kids playing on a beach. Even the baby posed in a sepia-toned professional shoot. No photo of Evan. No photo of me. Nothing to suggest he'd had a life before this one. I climbed the stairs slowly, my knees aching but steady. At the top, a long hallway stretched ahead, all the doors closed neatly. I could hear the soft, steady hum of a white noise machine from one room, the baby's. Another door stood slightly ajar, Evan's office. I paused. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, a clean desk, twin monitors, a framed diploma from Langford University, and a few sleek awards for insurance sales lined up on a shelf. Not a single personal photograph. But tucked into the bookshelf off to the side was something that caught my eye, a small wooden box. The one I'd given him after his father died. I crossed the room and opened it. Inside was a tiny photo of Evan as a child, grinning wide, a front tooth missing. Beneath it, a folded slip of paper. My handwriting. Never forget who you are. And never forget who stood with you when no one else did. Mom. He had kept it. The tears came fast, sudden, sharp, impossible to fight. I closed the box gently and slid it back into place. Downstairs, I stepped out into the backyard. The grass was clipped short, too short. The patio furniture gleamed, all white and spotless. In one far corner sat a sandbox, still wrapped in shipping plastic. They were building a life that didn't allow for mess. No room for fingerprints or crayon marks or the soft, chaotic memory of family. Just then, the sliding glass door opened behind me. Evan stepped outside. Oh, you're out here. Beautiful yard, I said. He looked around, as if seeing it for the first time. Yeah, I guess it's nice. We stood in silence for a moment. Then I said it. I saw the pictures inside. He rubbed the back of his neck. Mira has a certain style. I noticed. It's efficient. Mom, he hesitated. It's not that we don't appreciate everything you've done. You've always been generous. But this house, we've worked hard for it. It's part of a certain life. You understand, right? I turned to face him fully. You mean the kind of life where people don't have mothers who wear old cardigans and bake scones? That's not fair. No, I said. It's not. He looked away, eyes drifting to the unopened sandbox. Myra's parents are visiting next week. We're throwing a small brunch. It's more her family style. I waited. I just think maybe it's best if you don't mention the deed. I hadn't planned to. He looked back at me surprised. Really? Of course. I wouldn't want to ruin the illusion. There was a long pause, thick, heavy, and cold. Then he said it. The sentence that dropped like a stone in an empty well. You know how people judge. I just wouldn't want anyone thinking I didn't earn this house. And that was it. The truth. Finally. No ribbon. No sugar. I looked at him, my son, polished and grown, with just enough polish to dull his sense of shame. I never wanted credit, Evan, I said softly. I wanted connection. He shifted, uneasy. It's just complicated. No, I said. It's very simple. I walked back into the house, leaving him alone on the patio. Standing in the yard, he didn't want to share with the imperfect woman who raised him. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay on the guest bed, hands folded over my stomach, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The house whispered around me, the soft hum of the dishwasher, the creak of the pipes, the rustling of wind against double-glazed glass. I thought of my mother. She never had money to give me, but she gave me her voice, her fire, her refusal to be erased, her unshakable belief that people deserve to be seen, not hidden. And in that silent house, I decided I wouldn't be hidden anymore. They had dressed me up like a problem to be managed. Mira came into the guest room just after 5. She held a pale cardigan and a string of faux pearls. I thought you might want to wear something lighter, she said. Her tone made it sound like a suggestion, but it wasn't. I looked at the soft beige sweater, the kind designed to disappear. I brought my navy dress, I replied. Mira offered a tight smile. It's just that tonight's crowd is a little formal. You'll feel more comfortable in this. I took the sweater without protest. Let her think she was winning something. Downstairs, the dining table had been extended. Glasses sparkled. Napkins were folded like swans. Music floated from hidden speakers. The whole house smelled of rosemary and citrus. Not a single dish had been homemade. Everything was catered, labeled, precise. Evan emerged from the office in a dust-colored shirt and kissed Mira on the cheek. Everything looks perfect, he said softly. She beamed. Then she turned to me. So just one little thing. When people ask, just say you're an old family friend visiting from Oregon. Not that we're ashamed, of course, Mira added quickly. It's just simpler that way. I stared at her. Simpler. You know, Evan chimed in, Myra's family has a certain dynamic, expectations about appearances. This neighborhood has very curated social circles. People make assumptions. And what would they assume exactly? I asked. That your mother flew across the country to crash your party? He gave a tight laugh. Don't be like that, Mom. I'm not being anything, I said evenly. I'm just seeing it clearly now. The doorbell rang. Mira flinched slightly, then smoothed her hair. Okay, showtime. One by one, the neighbors trickled in, men in pastel sweaters, women in elegant heels, all of them with the same polished smile. They brought artisanal candles, local wines, and glowing compliments about countertops and light fixtures. And who's this lovely lady? One of the women asked, motioning toward me. Mira stepped in quickly. This is Marianne. She's a longtime family friend. She knew Evan back when he was little. Oh, how sweet, the woman cooed. You're practically an aunt. Aunt Mary, Mira added with a laugh. Exactly, I said, nodding. I smiled, took a sip of wine I didn't care for, and listened to the conversation swirl around me, gym memberships, school rankings, lakefront property taxes. Evan moved through the room like a trained host, smiling, laughing, listening just enough, offering up just enough. Mira watched him from the sidelines like a coach monitoring her star player. The whole evening felt like a stage production. And I was a well-placed prop. At one point, I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretense of refilling my glass. Evan followed. You're doing great, he said in a low voice. Thanks for playing along. Is that what I'm doing? I asked. Playing? He ran a hand through his hair. Look, I know it's strange, but you know how important this is to Mira. She grew up around money. Reputation matters in her world. And what about your world, Evan? He hesitated. This is my world now. I nodded. Understood. When I returned to the dining room, they were discussing property values, home improvements, and real estate forecasts. Someone brought up the soaring prices on the east side. Oh, but this house, Mira said brightly, we got it just before the area took off. Good timing. Smart move, one of the guests agreed. I sat quietly. Evan said nothing, no mention of who had made the purchase possible. Who paid the down payment? Who co-signed the mortgage? It didn't fit the narrative. I wasn't part of the story they were telling. Later, when dessert arrived, tiny lemon tarts in delicate glass cups, I caught Evan's eye across the table. For a brief second, he looked like a boy again. Nervous. Hesitant. Hoping I wouldn't embarrass him. I held his gaze and smiled, not kindly, not coldly. Just enough. Enough to remind him I was still here, quiet, but not erased. As the evening wound down and the guests filtered out, one man clapped Evan on the shoulder. "Lovely evening." And "What a charming aunt you have, so gracious." "Thanks," Evan replied. "She is." I went upstairs before he could say anything more. Slipped off the pale cardigan. Removed the faux pearls. Back in my nightgown, I opened my phone and looked once again at the photo of the deed. My name, his name, the number. I stared at it for a long while, then tapped share and sent it to my lawyer's private email. No message. Not yet. Just insurance. In case this little performance of theirs ever needed a rewrite. The house was dark, but not quiet. Somewhere in the walls, the plumbing sighed. The fridge made soft clicks as it slept. A motion sensor light blinked faintly in the hallway. I lay on the guest bed with my hands folded over the blanket, staring at the ceiling. The fan cast a slow-moving shadow that swept back and forth like a pendulum. I couldn't sleep, not for lack of exhaustion. My feet ached from shoes made for appearances, not comfort. My back throbbed from hours of sitting too straight. My jaw hurt from too much smiling. But it wasn't pain that kept me awake. It was the quiet realization that something inside me had shifted. I thought back to a time that felt both recent and impossibly distant, when Evan was small enough to fall asleep curled against me on the couch. He used to run to the door when I came home from work, arms wide, eyes bright. There were no folded napkin swans back then. No polished reputation to uphold. Just the two of us, in a modest apartment with mismatched plates, eating dinner on the floor because we didn't yet own a table. And he was proud of me then. He used to tell everyone, cashiers, neighbors, the school receptionist, "That's my mom. She's a nurse. She helps people." Now I was a family friend, an aunt, a liability. I turned on my side, careful not to make the bed creak. Outside, a wind had picked up. The rows of manicured hedges swayed gently in the moonlight. Down the block, a motion-triggered floodlight blinked on. In that pale glow, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a small metal plaque near the edge of the lawn. I sat up and squinted through the blinds. The Thorne residence, engraved in brushed steel, mounted into the earth with certainty. It wasn't even his full last name, just Thorne. Shorter, smoother, easier to fit into introductions. Evan Double had been trimmed down, polished, sanded into someone easier to digest at cocktail parties. It was almost funny. Almost. I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside was a hotel-style notepad and pen. I pulled it out and wrote in neat, deliberate letters. It's not bitterness. It's math. Then I drew a line down the center of the notepad page. On one side, money sent. Years worked. Hours given. Meals made. Papers signed. On the other, phone calls received. Invitations offered. Things spoken. The left side was full. The right side held nothing but air. I folded the page, tucked it into my wallet behind my driver's license, and turned off the lamp. But I still couldn't sleep. I thought about the conversation we'd never had, the one where Evan might look me in the eye and say, "I'm sorry." I forgot where I came from. I forgot who stood with me. But that conversation wouldn't happen. Not because he was cruel. Evan wasn't unkind. He was simply comfortable. Comfortable with the benefits of my presence and the invisibility of my identity. Comfortable accepting my sacrifices without questioning what they cost me. Comfortable not having to thank me. Comfortable not having to remember. And I'd let him be that way. For years, I convinced myself that love, even when lopsided, was enough. But now I was tired. Not just in my body. In the deeper, quieter places where hope had carried too much for too long without rest. I'd given him this house. I'd watched him host his new life in it. Heard the omissions, the revised introductions, the careful edits to history. I'd smiled through all of it. But now I was awake. Truly awake. And I couldn't unsee it. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood slowly. I walked to the closet where my suitcase sat, unzipped the front pocket, and pulled out the envelope. I unfolded the deed and stared at the date. October 18th. The day we closed on the house. The day I wired the money. The day I bought him a future he didn't want to share with me. And then I noticed something I'd forgotten. The deed wasn't just a formality. It wasn't just a name. It included a clause, one my lawyer had added at my request. No changes in ownership, refinancing, or a sale may be executed without written consent of the primary deed holder, Alma Devil. He couldn't even sell the house without my approval. And suddenly, I felt calm. Not vindictive. Not angry. Just clear. There would be no shouting. No letters. No confrontations. Only the slow, steady turning of the wheel, back into my hands. This was still my house. And he had forgotten what that meant. By morning, I had made a decision. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet. Final. Like a door closing with a soft click. The house was empty again. Evan and Mira had taken the baby to a music development session. The older kids were at school. I stood in the kitchen, still in my robe, drinking bitter coffee and planning my next steps. First, confirm the document. The original, not just the copy. I knew exactly where it was. I'd seen the beige folder tucked between appliance manuals in the laundry room cabinet. At the time, I hadn't wanted to touch it. Now, I wanted nothing more. I crossed the house slowly, not sneaking, just moving with certainty. As I had every legal right to, the laundry room was quiet. The dryer had stopped. I opened the cabinet, reached for the folder. Nothing had changed. The original deed. Signed. Notarized. My name first. His second. My signature dated in ink I remembered buying at a little shop in Williston, a pen made to keep. I laid the folder on the counter and opened my phone. One photo. Clear. Centered. Complete. Then, without hesitation, I emailed it to the same private inbox I'd used the night before, my lawyer's. Subject line, reference. No message. I didn't need one. I returned the folder exactly where I found it, not to hide it, but because some steps don't need an audience. They just need to be taken with care. Next, make space. I walked back to the guest room and packed a small tote bag, wallet, keys, phone, charger, reading glasses, and a change of clothes. The rest I left untouched. Clothes hanging in the closet. Suitcase against the wall. Bed still made. I wasn't planning to run. I was planning to move with intention, with structure. I made myself a sandwich using cold roast chicken from the fridge. Ate it standing at the window, looking out at the street of identical mailboxes and driveways, each home a version of the same story. At noon, the front door opened. Myra's voice carried in. Let's put her down for a nap before she explodes. They were back. I walked to the front hall, meeting them just as Evan placed the baby's car seat by the stairs. Would you mind if I had a little time here on my own? I asked. Just for a day or two. You've been so generous. I thought I'd enjoy a bit of quiet after you head to that resort you mentioned. Mira glanced at Evan. He blinked. You mean, while we're at the water park? Just for the weekend, I said. She smiled, rehearsed and brittle. Of course. That would be lovely. It's just, we hadn't planned to leave the baby with you. Oh, heavens no, I said lightly. You'll all go. I'll have the house to myself. A little retreat. I could use the rest. Evan nodded slowly. Well, sure. I mean, yeah, that works. I could see him calculating, thinking about the baby monitor, the alarm system, the chance I might do something that would later require explanation to Myra's parents. But he smiled anyway. You deserve a break, he said. After everything you've done for us. Funny, that was the first time he'd said anything close to that since I'd arrived. They left the next morning in a flurry of bags, sunscreen, and last-minute instructions about garbage collection and thermostat settings. Mira kissed the baby 3 times before Evan finally said, Come on, we'll miss the check-in window. I stood in the doorway, waving, holding the key fob like any trusted guest. Then I closed the door, locked it behind them, and leaned my back against the smooth white paint. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of the sound of truth returning to the walls. I walked into the living room and sat in the armchair I hadn't dared touch all week. I kicked off my shoes and stretched out my legs. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't an outburst. It was restoration. That afternoon, I called a car service and arranged for a courier to deliver a copy of the deed to a law office 2 towns over. I didn't call Evan. I didn't warn him. And I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean. At sunset, I made realty with leaves. I found a small ceramic mug pushed to the back of the cupboard, one with a hairline crack near the handle. Probably used once and forgotten. It was perfect. I sat on the back patio as the sky turned gold, listening to the sprinklers kick on in synchronized rhythm down the street. Tomorrow, I would call my lawyer. Tonight, I would enjoy the home I had paid for, the one where, for once, I wasn't a guest. The sun rose without asking permission. I was already awake, seated at the kitchen table with a monogrammed pen I'd found in Myra's drawer and a notepad beside my coffee. Outside, a landscaper trimmed hedges with earbuds in. A maintenance truck idled at the curb. Another day of curated calm. I made real coffee, none of the capsule nonsense, but slow-dripped, dark and familiar, the way I used to brew it when sleep was short and work was long. At 9:01 a.m., I dialed the number. 3 rings. Then the steady voice of Helen Stafford, attorney at law. Stafford and Patel. Helen, I said calmly. It's Alma Devil. She paused. Well, my goodness, it's been, 3 years since we last spoke. Still in Oregon. Temporarily in New York, I said. Visiting family. And how can I help? I glanced at the lone photo on the fridge, the only one that included Evan, cropped tightly between Mira and one of the stepchildren. He wasn't smiling. I'd like to initiate a reassessment of property control, I said, regarding a home I co-own. Go on. I explained it simply, that I had funded the house, that I held majority equity, that Evan's name was included for mortgage eligibility, and that I retained controlling interest. You never transferred ownership? She asked. No, and you have a copy of the deed? I sent it to your inbox last night, I replied. Subject line, reference. She paused again, then exhaled. The kind of quiet, lawyerly exhale that tries not to sound impressed or judgmental. What do you want, Alma? Just tell me plainly. I want the house legally reassigned under my sole name. Full authority. Unambiguous. Final. I don't plan to sell it, but I do plan to make some changes. Do you anticipate resistance? I sipped my coffee. He doesn't know yet. But yes. Helen didn't ask why. She didn't need to. She'd met Evan once, in a conference room years ago, back when he needed help with a failed app and a loan he forgot he'd taken. She'd assessed him in under 10 minutes. All right, she said. You're still the majority deed holder. We have leverage. I'll prepare a transfer declaration. Once you sign, we'll initiate formal reassignment. If he challenges, it's a civil matter. But we'll win. You want it quiet? As quiet as dignity allows. Understood. I'll email a draft this afternoon. We hung up. I sat in silence, staring at the open-plan living room. The expensive furniture. The color palette. The faint lemon scent of surface spray. None of it mattered anymore. At noon, I opened Evan's desk drawer. I wasn't snooping. I was securing what I had earned. Under a stack of architecture magazines, I found the spare set of keys, garage, office, and the fireproof box under the stairs. I used the garage key first. I stepped inside and took it all in, the boxes labeled Christmas, baby gear, old tech. One bin was marked Mom, miscellaneous. It was dusty. I opened the bin labeled Mom, miscellaneous. Inside were a few framed photographs of Evan and me, one from his high school graduation, another from that beach trip we took when he was 9. The one he always said was the best day of his life. There was a recipe card in my handwriting. A birthday card I'd sent 2 years ago, still unopened. I closed the lid and set it gently on the workbench. Then I moved to the fireproof box. Inside were documents, insurance, medical records, folders. One was labeled estate, Mira, her trust, her legacy plan. Not a mention of me. Back in the kitchen, I poured another cup of coffee. I stared out the window into the manicured backyard and thought about how many versions of me had lived inside Evan's mind. There was the version who cooked and cleaned. The one who worked double shifts, wrote checks, and bent herself to fit the outline of his needs. The version who stayed quiet. Now he would meet the one who remembered what she owned. That evening, Helen's draft arrived. It was clean, precise, no flourishes, no ambiguity. A quiet assertion of what was already mine. I signed it digitally and sent it back. A final message followed. Once filed, he'll receive formal notice. But if you'd rather tell him yourself, you have until Tuesday. I closed the laptop and turned off the light. I would let him have 2 more days of his illusion. Let him sip overpriced wine on the patio of some resort, believing he'd built a perfect life. Believing his mother stayed politely in the background. I would wait. and then I would knock on the front door of the life he'd excluded me from. Not as a guest, as the owner. Because silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. The day before they left for the water park, I found the right moment. We were in the kitchen. Mira was arranging little containers of snacks, gluten-free pretzels, carrot sticks, dried mango. Evan was folding towels into a beach bag. Everything was in motion, their minds already halfway into vacation. I was thinking, I said, casually, if you're comfortable with it, I'd love to stay here this weekend. While you're away. Mira lipped up, her hand hovering over a plastic container of grapes. Oh, she said, trying for neutrality. Just for some rest, I added. The house is so peaceful without all the running around. I don't get quiet like this very often. Evan glanced at her. She didn't respond. You mean, stay in the house while we're gone? He asked. Yes, I said, folding my hands on the counter. You've been kind to let me stay this long. I wouldn't mind a little solitude before heading home. Mira cleared her throat. It's just, the alarm system, I won't touch it. I'll leave the back lights on, water the plants if needed, and keep everything locked. No trouble at all. Evan ran a hand through his hair. It's just, you know how it is, Mom. It's not personal. No, I said gently. Of course not. It's never personal. That landed. He flinched just slightly. Mira said, well, if it's just for a couple of days, and you're comfortable. I am, I said, nodding. And I'd feel better knowing someone's here watching over things. We both know houses don't like being left alone. That was a phrase he'd heard before. My late husband used to say it about the old rental cabin we stayed in one summer. Houses are like people. They get cold when forgotten. Evan looked at me, and for a second, something shifted in his face. Like he saw it, the past, the memory. But then it was gone. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a ring of keys. Here. Everything's labeled garage, back door, mailbox. I took them without ceremony, slipping them into my purse as if they weighed nothing. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, and I meant it. Just not in the way he thought. Mira went back to her snack containers. Evan adjusted the strap on the diaper bag. I stood at the kitchen island and watched them packing up the life they'd built. Efficient. Detached. Curated. They left the next morning, just before dawn. Mira double-checked the baby's car seat. Then she triple-checked the fridge. Then kissed the baby 3 times, as if repetition could guarantee safety. Evan loaded the last suitcase into the trunk. I stood on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, holding a travel mug. Text me if anything comes up, he said. Of course! And I'll be careful with the alarm. I know it gets fussy. I'm sure you'll manage. Mira offered a tight smile. Thanks again for staying. It's a relief, really. I smiled back. Enjoy the water. You all deserve a break. Evan leaned in and kissed my cheek. Formal. Hollow. Then they were gone, taillights dissolving into the morning mist. I didn't wave. I walked back inside and locked the door behind me. I moved room by room, not inspecting, not claiming, just observing. It was a beautiful house, built for the approval of others. In the guest bathroom, I opened a drawer filled with tiny hotel-style lotions and sealed toothpaste tubes. I imagined Mira refilling it every few weeks, not expecting anyone to use them, but hoping someone might, and be impressed. Upstairs, I noticed a faint scuff on the wall, probably from a stroller wheel. Mira would notice it next week and schedule a painter. The thought of Mira fussing over the scuff on the wall made me smile. Downstairs, I opened the garage and retrieved the bin labeled Mom. I carried it into the kitchen and set it on the table. Inside, framed photos, a birthday card, a recipe card. Things they hadn't drawn out because that would have looked cruel, but couldn't bear to look at either. I laid them out one by one, like evidence in a quiet courtroom. A photo of Evan at 15, awkward, lanky, his arms slung around me at the community center's award night. Another from the coast, a year after my husband died, wind in our faces, a half-eaten sandwich in my hand. A recipe card in my careful handwriting, apple cake, his favorite. Then I left them there. I walked into the study, opened the laptop, and logged in with the password Evan once carelessly shared, Mira 1984. I opened the browser and went to the county property records portal, typed in the address. Both names still listed, Alma Devil, primary, Evan Devil, secondary. Still true, still legal, still mine. I left the page open, the truth sitting plainly on the screen. Then I leaned back in his office chair, resting my hands in my lap. I had the house. I had the keys. And now I had time. They were gone not in the sense that they'd vanished, but in the way that truly mattered. For the first time, they were fully gone. The echo of the garage door rolling shut behind their SUV felt like the closing line of a chapter one hadn't written, but now claimed as mine. I stood barefoot on the kitchen tiles, the keyring still warm in my palm. Outside, morning light poured through the tall windows, flooding the house with hollow brightness. No voices. No blinking baby monitors. No toys scattered across the floor. I had never heard this house quiet before, and now that I had, I realized how loud it had been not in sound, but in noise. The noise of performance. The noise of pretending. The noise of being tolerated. Now it was just a structure. Wood. Stone. Glass. A place without pretense. And it was mine. I walked to the pantry and found a proper mug, not one of their delicate espresso cups, but a big ceramic one with a chip on the rim, shoved to the back and forgotten. It was perfect. I boiled water and steeped a bag of strong black tea I'd brought from home. Mira had plenty of herbals and loose-leaf blends, but none of them tasted like anything, just vapor and affectation. I carried the mug outside to the back patio. The chairs were stiff and too white, but the view was pleasant. A stretch of green lawn ending in tall hedges, beyond which sat a row of nearly identical homes. Identical boxes with slightly different names. I sat, and for the first time in days, I let my shoulders fall. It was strange how quickly comfort returned when performance left. For a while, I just listened. Not for any reason. Just because I could. The distant chirp of a bird. Whined through the hedges. A neighbor's chimes. The tick of sun-warmed patio stones cooling in the breeze. I imagined Evan speeding down the freeway, music low, the baby gurgling in the back seat. Mira checking the itinerary, asking where they'd stop for lunch. Evan nodding, agreeing, doing what was expected. That had always been his talent, adapting. Blending into whatever version of life made others most comfortable. It served him well in business. And in erasing me. But not entirely. He hadn't asked me to sign away my share of the deed. Hadn't thought to check. Maybe he assumed I had. Or that I'd forgotten. That was always his mistake, believing love meant surrender. It never did. Love gives, but it remembers. That evening, I cooked not for show, not for guests, not to impress. Real food. I found flour, butter, and eggs. Made biscuits from memory. Roasted a chicken with lemon and thyme. Tossed a salad with far too much vinegar, the way I've always liked it. I set the table for one. Used the good dishes, the ones Mira kept boxed for company. I suppose I counted, finally. I poured a glass of red wine. Not from the special rack, but from the bottle hidden in the back. Cheap, practical, forgotten. It was fine. I never liked expensive wine anyway. It always tasted like effort. I ate slowly. No TV. No music. Just the clink of silverware on porcelain. The soft rhythm of my own breathing. After dinner, I walked through the house again, room by room. In the nursery, I sat in the rocking chair. It was pristine, barely used, the kind that doesn't creak. When Evan was born, I had an old wooden rocker. It groaned with every motion. He used to fall asleep to that sound, groan, creak, rock creak. I could still hear it. I looked at the books on the nursery shelf. All new. No folded corners. No sticky fingerprints. Just props. In the guest room, my room, for now, I pulled out my suitcase. Packed only what I'd need for 2 more days. The rest I left in the closet, neatly hung. There was no rush. The deed transfer had already been initiated. My lawyer would notify him soon. Until then, I wasn't moving. I wasn't hiding. I was simply home. I ended the night on the couch with a blanket over my lap and a crossword in hand, the kind I used to do with my husband before. He died. We used to sit side by side, arguing over crossword clues, passing the pen back and forth. It had been years since I'd done one aloud, but now, alone on the couch, I found myself whispering the words as I wrote. For letters. To own. Answer. Hold. The pen felt good in my hand. The lights dimmed softly, probably on a timer, but I stayed in place. Not asleep. Just still. It was quiet. It was enough. The next morning, I dressed with intention. Nothing fancy, slacks, a pressed shirt, the shoes I wore to church back home. Polished, reliable shoes for stepping into rooms where decisions are made. I ate breakfast slowly, toast, butter, one soft-boiled egg. I sat at the kitchen island and watched light move across the counter. The granite gleamed in the morning sun. Expensive. Cold. Already mine. At exactly 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to a woman in a dark blazer, wire-frame glasses, and a calm expression. On the double? Yes. I'm Layla Ross. I'm here on behalf of Stafford and Patel. She stepped inside with quiet confidence, carrying a slim leather folder and a tablet. Her presence didn't disturb the house. She fit into the stillness. We sat at the dining table. I'd cleared it of Carla's decorative candles and the ever-unread issue of Architectural Digest, always left open to a random page. Layla opened the folder. This is a standard reassignment packet. We've pre-filled it based on the deed and equity documents Ms. Stafford provided. You're listed as the primary grantor and funding party. All we need now is your signature to initiate the filing. I nodded. She slid the tablet toward me. Electronic is fastest. We'll handle the delivery of the physical originals. I signed. Each page blinked as my name appeared. Layla said nothing as I worked, just quiet presence, quiet power. When I finished, she tapped a few buttons. Done, she said. As of today, legal title reassignment is in progress. You'll receive confirmation by Friday. A physical copy will be mailed to your address of choice. I'll give you that before you go, I said. I'm not staying here. She nodded. Of course. She hesitated, then added gently, for what it's worth, you're not the first mother I've met in this situation. I raised an eyebrow. We handle a surprising number of quiet reversals, she said. Mothers, aunts, grandparents, people who give everything and are later asked to disappear. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Before she left, she handed me a small envelope. This is a summary packet. If you choose to speak directly with Mr. Dovell, you'll have the updated ownership statement. I walked her to the door. She gave a polite smile, then stepped into the sunlight, vanishing like a ripple on calm water. Back inside, I sat at the table, the envelope in my hand. The house was utterly still. No voices, no monitors, no motion. And then, like instinct, I rose. I walked into the study, opened Evan's desk drawer, pulled out a pen, and wrote a note. Evan, you asked me not to tell the neighbors I was your mother. So I didn't. You asked me not to talk about the house. So I didn't. You didn't ask me to sign it away. So I didn't. You asked me to help you build a life. So I did. I won't take more than what's already mine. I won't ask for thanks. But I won't disappear. Love, Mom, I folded the note and placed it under the framed certificate from Langford, angled with care. Then I placed the summary packet on top. The house didn't feel different. Not louder. Not warmer. But I did. That afternoon, I opened every door, the front, the back, the garage, and let the air move through. I sat outside and listened to the wind in the hedges, the soft creak of the wooden gate, the hum of life returning. The neighbors wouldn't notice anything had changed. But everything had. Tomorrow, I'd start packing. Not to leave in haste. Not to flee. Just to move forward. But tonight, I would sleep in the master bedroom. I had the keys. I had the name. I had earned it. The filing was processed at 9:43 a.m. on a Wednesday. I received the notification in my inbox, plain, clinical, efficient. A scanned copy of the reassigned title deed. My name, listed singularly under legal owner. No fanfare. No calls. Just one line from Helen. It's done. I sat at the kitchen table, the screen open in front of me, letting the words settle. Not in triumph. Not in anger. Just in balance. Outside, a gardener trimmed the hedges with a small electric blade, methodical, precise. Inside, the silence was whole. I boiled water, made tea, and carried the mug out to the patio. I sat in the same chair I'd use every morning that week. Behind me, the house stood solid, quiet, mine. Later, I opened the envelope Layla had left. The physical deed. Heavy paper. Embossed seal. The kind of document that made things real for others. I placed it in a folder, tucked it into my suitcase. Then I cleaned. Not like Mira did, not dusting surfaces already gleaming, not adjusting throw pillows by color. I cleaned with purpose. I washed the guest sheets. Wiped the kitchen counters. folded the laundry they'd. Laundry was still warm, left tumbling in the dryer. I folded each item, not because they would return, but because I was leaving. Yes, I was leaving. Not because I was afraid. Far from it. But because I had done what needed to be done. I had turned the page. I didn't need to live in this house to prove it was mine. I just needed to know it. At noon, I sat in the study. I reread the note I'd left for Evan, still tucked neatly beneath his framed degree. Still exactly as I'd written it. No edits. No flourishes. There was nothing else to say. At 2 p.m., I called a car service and reserved a ride for the next morning early, before they would return. Before explanations could turn into performances. The house remained still, unaware, unchanged. And yet I felt it. The shift. The quiet restoration of weight back to the right hands. That evening, I made one last meal, a simple stew. Beef, carrots, potatoes, onions. The way Evan liked it as a boy. I ate at the dining table. Alone. No music. No distractions. Just memory and hunger and peace. Afterward, I packed my bag, took only what I had come with, left the note, left the folder with the deed, left the photo of us at the beach, the one that had sat in a dusty bin in the garage, now framed and placed gently on the hallway console where everyone would see it. At midnight, I stood at the front door with the lights off, looking out through the glass at the quiet street. The Thorne residence, the plaque still glinted red under the porch light. I didn't need to change it. Let the neighbors keep their illusions. Let Evan keep his. But when he opened that folder in the morning, when he saw my name, singular and undeniable, he would understand. This wasn't a threat. It wasn't revenge. It was simply the return of what had always been mine, and it no longer needed his permission. They returned on a Sunday. Mira stepped through the door first, her voice already elevated by the baby's soft whimpering in the car. "Can you get the diaper bag?" "And the cooler, it's got the breast milk." Evan followed, keys in hand, dragging his suitcase behind him. The wheels thudded across the entry tile. "Mom, we're back." No answer. Mira frowned. Maybe she's still asleep? Evan checked the guest room. Empty. The bed made. Pillows arranged the way she found them. Guest towels folded neatly on the bench at the foot. He opened the closet. Empty hangers. In the kitchen, Mira set the cooler on the counter and glanced around. She didn't text or leave a note. "I don't know," Evan muttered, pulling out his phone. Nothing. No missed calls. No messages. He turned toward the hallway. That's when he saw it. The change. Subtle, but unmistakable. The photo on the console. Him and his mother. On the beach. Wind in his hair. Her hand gently on his back. He froze. "Mira," he called. "Come here." She stepped into the hallway. "What?" He pointed. That wasn't there before. She studied the frame. "Did she put that out?" He didn't answer. He was already walking down the hallway. Heart thudding. In the office, he found it. The note. Sitting on the desk. Folded. Tidy. Beneath his framed diploma. He read it in silence. Mira stood in the doorway. "What is it?" Evan didn't respond. He picked up the second sheet. The summary packet. The deed. Reassigned. His name, gone. Hers alone. Mira stepped forward, scanned the heading. "Wait, what the hell is this?" Evan sank into the chair. The house around him felt different. Smaller. Not colder. Not yet, but altered. "She never signed it over," he said softly. "What?" "She never signed away her share. She was always the owner." Myra's mouth opened, then closed. "She paid for it," Evan continued. "The down payment. The equity. She signed the mortgage so we could get it through underwriting. And now what?" Mira asked, voice rising. "She just takes it back?" He shook his head. "She's not taking anything." He looked back at the note. "She's reminding us." They stood there in silence. The baby monitor clicked to life somewhere upstairs, just a soft whine in the distance. Mira turned, storming toward the stairs. "You better fix this," she said over her shoulder. Evan remained in the office, note in hand. He read it again. And again. He tried to be angry, tried to feel betrayed. But instead, he felt something else. A memory. His mother's hand on his back at the beach. Her voice telling bedtime stories. A bowl of stew waiting after a long, hard day. She hadn't shouted, hadn't begged, hadn't stormed in with fury. She had simply reminded him of the truth. He folded the note slowly and held it in his lap. Then he picked up his phone. But he didn't dial. Not yet. That night, Evan didn't sleep. Not for lack of trying. He lay in bed beside Mira, who had turned her back to him with purposeful finality. Her breathing was steady, measured, controlled. The baby monitor hissed softly on the nightstand. But his house, was silent. Or maybe it wasn't his. That was the problem now, wasn't it? The paper didn't lie. Her name sat alone at the top of the deed, in bold, unmistakable print. Embossed, filed, certified. The folder had weight, the kind that made everything else feel flimsy. Around 3 a.m., carefully, not wanting to wake the baby, and padded downstairs. The hallway light was still on. As he passed the photo on the console, he stopped. It had been taken with a disposable camera. He remembered the feel of the sand between his toes, the squint of the sun. He couldn't have been more than 10. She'd been wearing a hoodie thrown on over her scrubs after a long shift, and still, she'd smiled. He'd forgotten that day. Not the event, but the feeling. In the kitchen, he poured a glass of water and leaned against the sink. She had stayed here for 2 days. Alone. Cooked. Cleaned. Sat on the back patio. Probably listened to the birds. Watched the hedges sway. She hadn't moved anything. Hadn't touched Myra's bases or the baby's toys. But somehow, her presence was everywhere. Not loud, not invasive, just undeniable. Evan walked into the office again and opened the folder for the 3rd time. His name wasn't on it, not even in the footnotes. He tried to recall the moment he decided to leave her out, not legally, but symbolically. He hadn't removed her name. He'd just let it fade, let the lie grow out of convenience. Told Mira it was temporary. Told himself it was simpler. He thought he'd had the down payment, hadn't he? Didn't that count? Except he hadn't. Not really. He'd called her late at night, voice low so Mira wouldn't hear. It's just for now, he'd said. Just to get it through escrow. She'd said yes before he finished the sentence. She always had. And now she'd reminded him what that yes had bought. He couldn't argue with it. Couldn't even resent her. Because beneath the polished life he'd built, beneath the staged introductions and silences, he knew the truth. He hadn't earned any of it alone. He thought about calling her, saying something, apologizing. Maybe, but what could he say? Sorry I asked you to shrink so I could grow. Sorry I borrowed your strength, then painted over it. At 3 a.m., he stepped outside. The lawn was damp, the air thick with dew. The plaque, the Thorne Residence, caught the porch light and gleamed faintly. He crouched beside it, ran his thumb across the letters. She hadn't taken it down. That broke him a little. He sat on the step and stayed there until the sky began to shift from black to navy, and the birds began their tentative songs. He wasn't sure what kind of man that made him, but he knew what kind of woman she was. And now, finally, so did everyone else. I didn't go back to the house. Not because I was afraid. Not because I was unwelcome. But because it was never about the house anymore. I'd made my point. I'd reminded him. And now I had something else to do. Something final. A week after the filing, I sat in a small office in Salem, Oregon, the same office where I'd signed the original wire transfer nearly 2 years before. Same notary. Same pen. But this time, I wasn't signing for anyone else. Name of the beneficiary, the notary asked gently. I smiled. Her name is Emily. She's 6. He paused. A granddaughter? I nodded. She won't be able to manage the property until I know, I said. It'll go into a trust. Full transfer on her 25th birthday. Or earlier, with a court petition. He finished the paperwork. When I left, I had nothing in my hands. Just a digital receipt. No need for ceremony. I took the bus home. 3 days later, Evan called. I let it ring once before answering. Hi, Mom, he said, quiet and hesitant. I got the documents. The full reassignment. It's real. Yes, I said. There was a long silence. You could have. I don't know. Talk to me first. I tried, I said. Years ago. He exhaled. I didn't think you'd really do it. I didn't think I had to, I replied. Until I did. He didn't argue. I could hear the background sounds of the house, a baby soft coo, a microwave beeping, a dog barking outside. Then his voice again, softer. You left the photo out. Yes. And the note. I did. Another pause. Thank you for not embarrassing me. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Oh, Evan, I didn't do this to embarrass you. I did it to remind you. A quiet beat. Emily's in school now, he said suddenly. First grade. Top of her reading group. I know, I said. She sent me a drawing. He was quiet for a while. Then, with some effort, what happens to the house now? I let the pause linger before answering. It goes into a trust, I said. For Emily. I've signed it over. She'll inherit it when she's old enough. Another silence. Longer, this time. That's fair, he said at last. I mean, it's more than fair. Yes, I said. It is. We didn't say much after that. Later that week, I received a package. No note. Just a small photo frame. The same one from the hallway console. Us at the beach. I placed it on the shelf near my front window, next to the photo of my husband in uniform, next to the ceramic handprint Emily made in preschool. A few weeks later, Emily called. Grandma, she asked. Yes, love. Daddy says you gave me a house. I laughed. Not yet, but one day, if you want it. She was quiet, thinking, will it still have the big bathtub? If your parents don't change it, yes. Can I pay my room pink? You can paint it anything you want. She giggled, then asked seriously, will you live there with me? No, sweetheart, I said gently, but I'll be nearby. Promise. I promise. She paused. You're not mad at Daddy anymore? No, I said. And I meant it. Not anymore. Because it had never really been about anger. It was about memory. About dignity. About putting my name back where it belonged. And making sure the next generation knew where things came from. So that one day, when Emily walked through those doors, she'd know the truth. Not just about the house, but about the woman who made sure it still stood. The days grew quieter after that. Not emptier, just quieter. Like a room after a meaningful conversation when everything important has already been said. I returned to my small garden, took walks to the post office, baked more often, sent letters. Emily wrote back sometimes. Big, bold letters, slightly crooked, with drawings in the margins. Once, she sent me a picture of the house, drawn in pink crayon, stick figures out front. She labeled them carefully. This is me, she wrote above the girl in the window. This is my house. And then, in smaller print, Grandma's house too. I kept it on my fridge. Evan didn't visit, but he called on birthdays, holidays. Sometimes just to check in. He never mentioned the deed again. And neither did I, because it wasn't about winning. It was about not vanishing. Mira never called. That was fine. We had both said enough. And the house, that big, curated, careful house, stood where it always had. A little quieter now. Maybe a little more honest. Evan stopped calling it the Thorne residence. The plaque disappeared one day. No announcement. Just gone. I was told Emily had asked about it. And Evan had said, we don't need it anymore. I liked that. One spring afternoon, I sat on my porch with a blanket across my knees, watching wind carry petals down the sidewalk. The sun was warm, not harsh, not demanding, just there, like I was. And if someone were to ask me what happened, how a mother could fly across the country and leave with more than she arrived with, I'd tell them this. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes love has teeth. Sometimes the quietest woman in the room owns the floorboards under everyone's feet. And sometimes the house remembers exactly who built it. Sweetheart, don't forget to subscribe and leave me a little note in the comments. I love hearing from you.